we call upon the leader of opposition. Here.
Oh,
Yes, you're.
okay. Um, if there's I could just raise your hand because I'll see the screen. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2. Force us to be a sandwich generation, for example, a high expectation that young generation have to bear, whether they could or not. It shackled their life, it shackled their mental well-being. It deprives their young. We have to fix this. Let's see why government cases is so problematic. Firstly, they said that marginal people who need job will be lazy because this narrative give you symptoms, etc. But several responses. Firstly, if government concern is all about how marginal people could survive, we think that the mental and physical well-being is the prerequisite of your productivity, right? If you force yourself to work relentlessly, for example, and you get sick, we think that it also takes your 2 days of productivity, right? But secondly, but even if people start to be deliberately lazy, two things. Firstly, we question why is it bad from the get-go. We question why is it wrong from the get-go, because I think it's still their concern to do that. We think that it is the capitalistic narrative to say that your work has to always bigger than your traveling, for example. Why people can have their own travel and happiness under this of the house? We question that. But secondly, but I'll flip this. We think that there's still a check and balances, right? Notice, if you travel a lot, your money will be gone, so you still have to work, right? We think that this will be also their check. I think that this could be also their check and balances to not forget about their work, etc. But look, I think that we are not being half stands here. On government side, people would work so hard, right? But comparatively, under outside the house, people would only work to fulfill people will only fulfill their people will only work to fulfill their daily life basis need, right? But okay, several point of setup here. Firstly, we think that on the opposition side, we want this glorification, right? So our burden is only to prove why this glorification is needed and bring a good impact, and this group impact will overwhelm all of their benefit. So we don't have to regret it. But secondly, I think that outside the house, work still exists. People still work, but the difference is maybe people won't work that hard. They will only choose the work that they want. For example, the work they are maybe. They are maybe only to fulfill their to only to fulfill their um, daily basis need, for example, etc. But one argument here, why it will protect those marginal actor? What is the marginal actor that we want to protect on the opposition side? We think that this marginal actor is those who are being blinded by the current dominance of the narrative, right? The people who are sacrificing their family, their health, etc. How do we protect them? Several ways. Firstly, we think that I already explained how before the motion exists, there's a dominant narrative about work hard, etc. Right? It is possible because it was actively being pushed by these capitalistic world, by these companies. It may not look like explicitly, but notice how school system, for example, are built to make us always study hard. For example, by always give appreciation, of always give appreciation, to those who are study hard. For example, or for example, for example, how school are also glorifying them who are having a good grade, for example, or how company or for example, how company reward us with a higher and higher wages if we loyal and we work hard. For example, we think that this system implicitly pushes us to work and work harder. Why? Because our reward is intertwined with the dopamine hormone in our brain, making us addicted to want to achieve that over and over again because human love rewards, right? But also look how people are who are choose to be not work harder, for example, who are choose to live without any stress, not ambitious, are also being punished in the status quo, i.e. in the company. If you are refused to work overtime or lembur, for example, you are being punished. You are being punished, for example. People call you lazy, not loyal, etc. Or even maybe your bosses will make you even harder to get a promotion, for example. It may or yeah or maybe how students who get a bad grades, for example, are being punished by being called as stupid, for example. What's the aim of this explanation? Firstly, I want to tell you that the world without soft life narrative will be naturally goes to a capitalistic narrative. This capitalistic narrative will be so dominant. We think that this is impossible. We think that this is possible because it was pushed by the system of the world itself. Because the world that we live right now is inherently capitalistic, right? But secondly, I also want to tell you that humans are also inherently being pushed to this capitalistic world. There's no good consent because yeah, because the people who refuse this narrative will be punished by being isolated in the society, for example, and the one who follow it get rewards, for example. This system inherently push everyone in this world to go to this capitalistic lifestyle, right? So how we save this marginal actor who are being pushed to this capitalistic world? Firstly, simple. We need this narrative. We think that we need this narrative. They are very dominant. They are being glorified to challenge this capitalistic narrative. That's why opposition cases is being urgent, right? So why it will be significant? Firstly, we consider that maybe government side will say that the soft life narrative will be also accessed on the side of the house. But several things. Firstly, even if it's true, we think that it is not will be a significant under the side of the house because the narrative will also be overwhelmed with the capitalistic narrative, right? Because the soft life narrative are not dominant enough. But secondly, but even if soft life narratives still have influence under the side of the house, we think that it is only accessible for those certain people, i.e., the people who are progressive enough, people who are people who are have a high critical thinking skill, for example, to consider their own condition, for example, the people that have capability to understand the situation, etc. But look, I think that not people have the same critical thinking as those certain people, right? There's also people who are maybe uneducated, for example, so they don't even realize that the narrative is exists. The people who are not as critical as the others will be very easy to sway to this capitalistic narrative. They are being pushed. They are being pushed by these companies, for example. Also, how about the people who don't have access to this narrative? Because maybe it will only spread to a certain amount of because maybe the narrative will be spread to the certain amount of community, for example. But comparative under outside the house, because it was glorified, it be very dominant. Hence, it was being normalized. It was being accessible, and because it dominant, it could also save those marginal people who are not that critical. Because uneducated people will tend to follow the most dominant narrative, right? That's why we need this glorification specifically. It also proves why the narrative that are just axis on the government side is not enough to save those marginal people. Hence, we need a bigger narrative to change their mindset to make them live to save them from the propaganda that shackled their mind from the get-go, even when they don't realize it. But secondly, the second way is about how we can save the actor. At least on our side of the house, the people who are initially be critical enough to choose to not follow this capitalistic narrative wouldn't be demonized under our side of the house, because notice that on their side of the house, these people would be called lazy, for example, useless, have no future, etc. At least on our side of the house, these people could also get the validation. When I was being a sandwich generation, or I have to work 9 to 5, for example, but when I was quit but for example, if I want to quit and search for a new simple job, for example, I was being pushed back by the society, by my own family, for example, my family that tell me that you need this job because you have to be rich, for example, etc. So I think that this glorification is needed from the get go to save those marginal people, right? So why mental well-being is very important. Firstly, mental and physical well-being is the prerequisite of all the government cases. If their cases is about how people could be productive in work, for example, we think that it is very important for them to keep their mental health, because we think that the productivity is also being influenced by how well your mental and physical, right? All the productivity isn't at its maximal if you are sleepy, tired, or even stressed mentally, etc. But i.e., if you physically sleep, but I think that so we think that this glorification is very needed under outside the house to save these major people, right? So if their concern is about the productivity, etc., I think that we also explain how mental is and physical well-being is the prerequisite of it. So proud to oppose.
We thank the leader of opposition for their speech. Next, I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Hi, checking am I audible and visible?
Audible and visible.
Okay, thank you, Kak. For POI, just through unmuting yourself, and I'll be starting my speech in three, 2, 1. The fundamental flaw in opposition's world is that they confuse temporary emotional comfort with long-term human flourishing. Just because something feels peaceful today, right now, doesn't mean it prepares people to survive in reality later. First rebuttals towards opposition is on the idea of they state that people will still work hard under their sides of the house. This is true because culture directly shapes what people perceive as desirable and also acceptable at the very least. If soft life is constantly glorified, fewer people will voluntarily choose highly demanding pathway because simple suffering itself becomes socially stigmatized, as what my first speaker have explained to you before. In real life, many careers already require people to tolerate long training periods, uncertainty, pressure, and also exhausted. For example, doctors during their residency, right? Entrepreneurs risking failure for years, researchers working under constant rejection. So this means eventually, at the end of the day, fewer people sustain difficult commitment long enough to succeed. Even if opposition would say that, so some ambitious people will still exist. That misses our comparative here, Judge. Society doesn't collapse because literally nobody works hard. The harm happens when significantly fewer people are willing to endure pressure consistently. Even a moderate decrease in resilience and yeah, across an entire generation already weakens the innovation, the productivity, and long-term social stability. But then they also state that people can freely reject the narrative if they wanted to. Even if some individuals, personally reject soft life ideology, capitalist society still punish people who cannot sustain pressure and competition. The economy still, at the end of the day, reward consistency, discipline, and adaptability. Deadlines still exist, right? So employers still prefer resilient workers. Universities still reward high performance. Competition doesn't disappear simply because culture tells people, prioritize peace. This creates a dangerous contradiction under their side of the house. Note that young people are emotionally conditioned to avoid discomfort, but the real world still demands discomfort. Therefore, many people psychologically unprepared for reality and experience even worse stress once they enter competitive environments, right? In real life, this looks like people immediately burning out in workplace because they never built tolerance for pressure beforehand. Our side at least prepare people honestly for how adulthood functions. Their side comforts people temporarily today while making future adjustment even harder at the end of the day. But see, then they also state that soft life becomes accessible to everyone. This actually worsens the problem here. Note that if this narrative becomes dominant and highly accessible, then avoidance itself becomes normalized across the society. Previously, only privileged people could afford to fully detach from ambition because they really had financial security, right? But once the mindset spreads culturally, even people without privilege begins internalizing lower expectations and disengagement despite still needing upward mobility. In real life, the let's say the lower class people or poorer one or middle class youths often cannot afford soft life long term because they still need to survive economically. But if they constantly consume messaging that frames struggle as unhealthy and sacrifice as toxic, they become trapped between unrealistic emotional expectations and harsh economic reality. Meanwhile, privileged one youth, the upper class youths, let's say, still remain protected by their family wealth and safety nets. Therefore, their side ironically harms vulnerable people more because privileged people can survive comfort culture while less privileged people suffer the consequences of this weakened ambition and resilience. But also they stated that you need to be for rebuttal. They said you need to be you need rest to be productive. This is not only achievable through a soft life aesthetic. We already tell you our counterfactual before that gives you a better self-help system, more awareness around mental health, more recognition of burnout. Ivanka already tells you that this soft life glorification never tells you how to get the appropriate amount of rest to get up at work the next day. Soft life aesthetic only tells you to
PR.
rest, and keep resting. No, thank you. Our counterfactual will have a more capitalistic narrative they stated before. No, because people will not just endure constant pressure without creating a narrative around solving it. Motivating people to take a break is already achieved under outside the house. Why? A. People inherently do feel tired. The reason they want to work is because of financial necessity. But during the moments that they can take a break, for example, take a holiday, to play games, for example, with your friends, let's say, people probably have the incentive to do so because they work for their family, their happiness. But B, this actively gets worse under their side of the house. Note that because this also looked like children talking to their parents cluelessly. The breadwinner of the family is guilt tripped. Dad, why can't we go to Bali, for example? Dad, why can't we travel to Legoland, Malaysia? Meanwhile, they are still struggling to make ends meet. This just goes to what up case glorification is not even urgent. But B, they stated that people aren't progressive enough to consider any solutions rather than a soft life. Then we flip this easily by saying that people will just up in a soft life aesthetic without any consideration of their
Yeah.
responsibility. People aren't aware of mental health. If people have a capitalistic mindset, this means they won't even opt in a soft life aesthetic. This destroys their own case judge. First clash then on the issue of protecting peace versus the normalization of avoiding responsibility. Opt will try to frame soft life as a simply having a healthier boundaries and rejecting toxic overworking. They will say that, oh, young people deserve fresh emotional peace and yada yada and sustainable lifestyle instead of constant pressure. But my extension is that the problem is not this occasional rest. The problem is the glorification of comfort as the highest life goal. Once society repeatedly teaches young generation that discomfort should always be minimized, people slowly stop seeing responsibility as something meaningful and start seeing it as something that is oppressive. In real life, this look like young people constantly withdrawing the moment commitments become emotionally difficult. Students immediately lose motivation once academics become stressful. Employees quit jobs not because they're abusive, but because pressure feels like emotionally draining. A relationship becomes disposable because it conflicts. It interpreted as emotional disturbance rather than something to work through. Even ordinary adult responsibility begin feeling too much because the issue is not laziness, is looking like an extreme picture. The issue is a gradual lowering of tolerance toward discomfort itself. To preemptive here, Op may say that people under soft life still work hard. They just prioritize balance. But balance, note that balance only exists, right, when people still believe difficult goals are worth enduring hardship for. The cultural messaging of soft life slowly changed that mindset because ambition becomes associated with burnout, sacrifice being viewed as unhealthy, and enduring stress becomes treated as failure. To prioritize yourself properly, even if only partially internalized, this still shift how an entire generation approach commitment and responsibility. They may also say, oh, burnout is a bigger problem than avoidance. Sure, okay, but I think avoiding hardship doesn't solve burnout itself. It weakens the coping ability entirely over time. Humans build resilience through repeat exposure to manage deep pressure itself. The less people tolerate stress, the more emotionally overwhelming future stress becomes. This is what their world look like, Judge. And under all of those reasons, I'm super standing in proposition.
We thank the speaker for their speech. Next, I call upon the deputy leader of opposition. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
I'm not visible yet. Am I visible? Is this okay?
Honestly, it's backlight, but I guess it's quite fine.
Okay. In that case, I think few things before I start the debate. Firstly, trigger warning. I think there's some sensitive issues in my speech today, but that's for only debate purposes. But secondly, POI, I think you can just unmute. And oh, without further ado, I'll I'll start my speech. The count of three. Three, two, one. Panels, in a world where without the glorification of soft life, the youth would be facing tons of pressure, academic pressure, fake social media life culture, and even and feel they aren't up to standard. This pressure would hurt the youth in many ways. Some, in extreme cases where some can handle it, they can even uh, commit suicide because the pressure is that strong and they can't live with that pressure. Some feel like they're worthless and only a tiny a percentage can sacrifice their health, their life, uh, their balance for productivity. What I'll do in this debate, a few things. Firstly, rebuttals. Secondly, crystallization. But thirdly, clash press extension. Rebuttals. Panels. When the government said that, oh, people want to be doctors, extremers, etc., etc., they need a lot of hours to achieve that. They need to work hard. Firstly, panel, we agree. But the thing is, not only people with money will have a safety net at the end, but uh those that are in poverty, for example, are just thrown away in uh but those in poverty would only be thrown away in their capitalistic world. Not only that, with just productivity everything mindset, you're also just burning yourself out from your passion. The vacation, etc., is also not a good way to release stress. For example, taking a week of vacation from hell is not a way to fix yourself. That's like taking a fish from a sewage and giving it a luxurious bath in Bali, for example. At the end, you're still going back to that bad work environment or hell and suffer more. But secondly, they said that only the privileged can experience a slow life. But notice, only on a proposition side, also only rich people that are only allowed to rest and travel, because marginal people are being shackled by the narrative that they must always work hard uh, and yeah, achieve big things. But at least on our side, we give the chance for everybody, not uh poor, rich, and etc., etc., the chance to travel, rest, and actually enjoy life. But uh, thirdly, they say that motivating
Go on.
their solution. No, thank you. Their solution is just motivating people to take a break when they feel stressed. This is not true, panels, because notice on the context slide how on their world it is already that extreme, it's already that competitive. So if they take a break, they might lose out and feel left out at the end, which actually can make them more distressed at the end and make them suffer. But uh, I feel like uh uh but secondly, fourthly, but by prioritizing yourself, it means that, oh yeah, it means that you are striving for what you need and what you want. When government said that balance would lead to people associating sacrifice and hard work as unhealthy, this is not true, because at the end, uh why bother having all the money on the world but you're not healthy and you're not well off? But crystallization, a few clarification. We don't say that people would be would work hard. Gov is being very dismissive here. We say that people would uh, still work enough to fulfill their basic needs. It manifests on people not working overtime, for example, or people who work on their passion even if the wage is not that high. I also think that the mindset of a soft life at the very end is just prioritizing yourself, your mental being, rather than chasing society's expectation. But crystallization, I think this motion doesn't happen in a vacuum, meaning proposition needs to realize that we live in a very capitalistic world where pressure to achieve something is at an all-time high, meaning people, especially young people, will be burned out just to work and fulfill those expectations from other people or from themselves. Because I feel like they want to make their closest people or their self proud, because if not, I feel like other people would be sad and disappointed, and they don't want that, because at the end that will be just more added pressure and added stress in their life. But I feel like this motion is a this house regrets, meaning in the status quo this kind of life is already being implemented. The reason why it's being implemented, because in the status quo capitalism is already that bad. It pushes people to be more stressed, it pushes people to work at their limits. But in our side of the house, yes, people will get lower grades, lower wages, they will gain less in material belongings, for example, but what they uh, gain back from it is far more worth it. It is from what it is mental well-being, inner peace, and good physical health. We have explained to you from Marvel that how mental well-being and mental health is so important. Is actually that both of those things is actually the prerequisite to happiness. Because if I offer you, for example, two options, you will have $1 million, but you suffer depression and you have disability, for example, or you have 10K USD, but you actually felt mentally well and have good health. I feel like you would pick the second option. Why? Because I feel like, why bother having all the money in the world but you can't spend it? But lastly, Clash, the impacts toward youth. What proposition brings to the table? They say that youth in our side will be lazy and throw away this responsibility. This can stand. Why? I feel like this isn't true at all, because notice how people wouldn't be lazy nor throw away the responsibility, because at the end they will still have both of those things, but they
Yeah,
will
I
step it down. No, thank you. They will actually step down a notch on those things. They will not work overtime, as I already explained and my P1 explained, and not actually stress themselves to death about work, and actually have a better mental well-being. People will not be lazy. They will be simply working less for their mental well-being. But even if in our side is a laser, I feel like that's okay. Why? Because I feel like uh I feel like in their side, if people work so hard till the point they get sick, I feel like people will in their side would be much more lazier. Why? Because I feel like in their side, people who would get sick needs to rest, right, to get well, and etc etc, meaning that uh they would be much more lazy in their side, because they got because the sickness they got from working hard. But extension, I feel like the lifestyle is very significant in today's world, because if you look at the world where the pressure to achieve good things is on all-time high. This pushes people to work hard, to work like a horse, and this makes people eventually in their side more sick. Because why? Because I feel like people have a certain limit to their body, and if they exceed that, they would be sick and eventually couldn't do anything. But this glorification, without the glorification, people in their side would just be a slave to saying yes to everything, because if they say no, they will afraid to lose out on the competition and etc, meaning that people in their side would be actually less happy. So weigh this. We want two things: urgency and significance. Urgency because the status quo is already that extremes, but significance because in our side the youth would be much more happier. For all those reasons, I'm very proud to oppose.
We thank the speaker for their speech. Next, I call upon the government whip. Here.
Okay, hi. Just checking if I'm visible and audible.
Visible and audible.
Okay. Mm, um, oh yeah. By the way, any POI, please just unmute yourself. I may be talking about something sensitive. I don't think so, but if it does, please point it out. I'll be glad to apologize. And then three, sorry, 3, 2, 1. I think on panel, I think you're kind of confused right now, right? Like under both sides of the house, they're trying to push and pull between like, oh, this harm actually makes you more lazy. Under our side, we're trying to solve it. I feel like the thing is, it's problematic under proposition when they try to tell you a lot of these types of things happen under our side because we're trying to pursue capitalism. This just proves to you, Judge. One, they did not listen to Ivanka when we told you are counterfactual. Two, they never gave any proper analysis as to why that glorification leads to the internalization of individuals actually working harder, or how somehow they can pursue better work-life balance. Three clashes under this debate then. Firstly, what does the motion actually look like in reality? Two, I'm going to tell you about accessibility and why it's more significantly worse under their side of the house. Three, why it's actually their case that's not urgent, why this glorification is not necessary in the very first place. First, what does the motion actually look like then? First, both sides try to claim that, oh, XYZ is going to be bad under your side of the house, about how people will still care about their finance anyways, and how, oh, I'm going to work hard and I care about my parents, blah, 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 blah. the link under their side of the house kind of breaks down when they fail to actually tell you what the narrative actually looked like. Ivanka told you from the very beginning, this looks like a glorification of how you should, for example, pursue a lot of like short-term happiness. For example, taking a month trip to Bali, or for example, scrolling for a very long time. This matters because it tells you that this type of glorification oftentimes emphasizes that, oh, you should, for example, prioritize yourself or go against capitalism in the metric that you, for example, have to pursue yourself in terms of just trying to protect yourself from all of these harms. But notice, this is something that makes you resilient to every part of capitalism. Opposition may tell you that, oh, you still need to work hard to get your money anyways. But exactly because this money is framed as something that's capitalistic, meanwhile, you're supposed to act as rebellious towards it. That's why they're, for example, going to go against it in the very first place, such as pursuing short term happiness, like I don't know, gaming with your friends, scrolling, etc., etc. But secondly, what does the counterfactual look like? We tell you that exactly because there is an urgency to, for example, have to pursue mental health, that there is a lot of pressure from capitalism, that in the vacuum of there being this type of narrative, there needs to be another narrative to replace it. Ivanka told you that this probably looks like, for example, pursuing maybe like short term happiness, like when you're in work, maybe you should go out and take a breath. Maybe you somehow need to work for it. And notice, none of their opposition side, neither Kevin or Marvel, told you why this was unlikely or why this will be getting worse under our side of the house. And it's far too late for Rescue to, for example, tell you why this does not work. Now then, given that we already told you this clear competitive, you should buy our case because we provide a deeper likelihood and actor analysis as to why it's better to happen under our side of the house. Before I move on, any POI, 3, 2, 1. Second clash on accessibility. We tell you that this narrative is highly inaccessible because quite literally, soft life oftentimes emphasizes that you, for example, need to take a Bali trip to whatever, or you need to, for example, go to the mall with your friends and shop whatever. This is quite problematic because inherently a lot of people cannot access it, especially when they, for example, need to pursue education. But moreover, for example, the people that needs to prioritize their education because it is a financial necessity under their side of the house. Because quite crucially, under these types of people, they still need financial security in the very first place. What happens then is that when they see this type of Instagram scrolls, they see that, oh, other people on an individual, other people can go to Bali, they get to be hedonistic. It's this type of narrative that pushes to these people. They feel guilty, firstly, for not being able to do it. But secondly, it's exactly because of this birth lottery that makes them feel excluded as a part of society because they feel like they're never young in the very first place. This looks like when you're, for example, working hard, people telling you that, oh, you're a corporate slave, that you're trying too hard, that you're a sweat, for example. This is something that is intrinsically harmful towards their side of the house. But moreover, let's try to look at the trade off. Sure, some may be, let's be very charitable and say some people may be more chill under their side of the house. Maybe some people pursue a level of wellness within their lives, like how they deal with school, but inherently, this does not make a difference. The harm still exists. For those who cannot have the ability to, for example, go through these types of situations, it feels like they're discriminative. It makes them feel like corporate slaves. Try hard, pick me. They try to dissociate themselves harder. But insofar as they do not have the financial capacity to actually be well, what do they usually go to? They oftentimes go to more short-term measures, such as scrolling, gaming. This is something that's more accessible towards the youth that we know right now, instead of going to Bali. This is probably something that's highly likely. Why? For example, when you're trying to pursue your assignment, people believe that it's capitalistic. What do they do then? They scroll even more. They delay their deadlines until the final moment when they, for example, have like 5 deadlines on Monday and they feel like they cannot actually achieve it at the end of the day. The impact is one, they delay themselves as a way to join the glorification, and then it harms themselves significantly worse. But secondly, I believe it actually worsens individualism. What does this look like? It looks like the parents, for example, that tells them, oh, you're being too lazy, you're being too soft. What does this happen then? It worsens an individualistic mindset because you believe your parents are wrong and you distance yourself further. The case study is simple. Parents say, oh, you're having it too soft. Children don't listen because they believe that, oh, You didn't know what it's like in my time. Back in your day, you were born on a silver spoon, for example. They rebel harder and they believe that their parents are too pressuring. This makes them actually live in a vacuum and I don't know, social cognizance that makes them, for example, listen to the narratives in social media even harder. And then opposition says that capitalism exists under our side of the house by attracting people for being lazy and that it's a response to capitalism. Three responses. One, capitalism doesn't change. Trump won't suddenly open the street and corporates don't suddenly disappear under their side of the house. I do not see how they suddenly solve the problem. Two, they tell you that monetary constraints exist. That's why they will work hard anyways. This still puts a high bar on the individual level. They have to work even harder. For example, have to go to Bali or like Sweden in order to pursue like I don't know education or like for example tourism, for example. Ainsley also told you that this is also a pressure upon parents who are, for example, already financially constrained. Why? Because it's these type of people that do not have the ability to access so. But when their children bring up this scroll on TikTok and says, Dad, why can I go to Bali, for example? This is what makes them very scared to actually be, this pressure is actually worse on those minorities. But thirdly, humans are inherently short-termists. This looks like them accumulating deadlines to not actually look at it. Final clash then on urgency. We tell you that opposition has no case. We have already solved it under our side of the house, and they have never contested with it. Because inherently, taking a short breath is not something that's difficult. All you need is 5 seconds. 5 seconds to, for example, go outside and take a deep breath or meditate to yourself for 15 minutes or whatever in order to distance yourself. What is the distinction here? Is that taking a long-term trip to Bali is something that's sometimes inaccessible because quite literally, you still need to go to work. You still need to go to school inherently, right? But under our side of the house, it's easier to make that distinction because quite literally, when you are trying to pursue that peace of mind, but it's only when you still need to intertwine it in terms of your work-life balance. Therefore, it's better achieved under all our side of the house, all reasons proposed.
We thank the government whip for their speech. Next, I call upon the opposition whip. Here.
Hello, am I audible and visible?
You're audible, but you're not visible.
I'm using two devices.
Oh, I see. Okay. Audible and visible.
Okay. POI preference, just unmute. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. If I was pressured to work 5 extra hours just to get paid a percentage more, I'd rather quit. Self-respect is heavily important, especially in the youth. Without the glorification of the soft life, people wouldn't care about themselves and force themselves to work, study, and all of this all for the sake of productivity, money, and grades. Government's counterfactual of saying how taking a step back is enough is actually not. Panels, notice how the current generation of youth is very productive because of social media and content creation. They feel like they cannot achieve this level of success because of social media and all of the fake lives and all of the fakeness in social media. It ruins their mental, and taking a step back is not enough. Even while telling people to have these tips while meditate and all of this, it's actually worthless because to someone who feels like they cannot do something and they take a step back to look at the bigger picture, it makes them even more sure that they cannot do something like this. But okay, what is the strategic mistake that Proposition has made? I believe that Proposition is nitpicky in their explanation when they said, oh, the way of poor people or people who do not have access to de-stress, to go traveling, etc., is simply to scroll or game. That is a very nitpicky way, panels, because not everybody plays games, and this lifestyle is for you to be better for yourself. It's you versus your past self, right? Because of this, people de-stress in positive ways, such as socializing, meditating, but okay, I'll be charitable. Even if it is true that people scroll on TikTok and play games, our side is still better because on our side, our people are still prioritizing their health, unlike their side. They focus they focus purely on productivity and working. However, on our side, the people on our side respect themselves. They know their worth, and that is not something that happens in their side of the house. Let's see why government's cases is so problematic. Their first speaker never posted to you what the counter narrative are likely to happen in this debate, but they implicitly said that the capitalistic work wouldn't exist. Two responses to this. We questioned what the likelihood on it is. The narrative that would appear naturally in the capitalistic world, as Marvel has said, explain how it is possible because companies and governments is naturally pushing these narratives into school systems or a work system. Also, because it was the biggest narrative that were last long in a very long time, right? And we think that, Judge, you should buy our characteristic because we have a better likelihood. Also, since they never explain why the capitalistic world would be not possible to happen, right? But okay, even if we assume that government was right, so I questioned what their narrative would appear then. Because I think that the narrative that were likely to happen is whether you work hard or you wouldn't work hard, right? So what's government cases? It's unclear for me. But okay, I'll be charitable here. Even if we take their counterfactual and said, oh, that wouldn't be a capitalistic world, I think that the glorification of a soft life is still needed. Because simply because if it is a work hard or a not work hard world, at the very end, self-respect is something that the youth needs. Everybody needs some level of self-respect, right? But okay, also the way that they said that, oh, people would be deliberately lazy, we think that Marvel has already responded to this argument, right? But look, their explanation, even on Jimmy, are stopping at the explanation that, oh, people would be lazy, short-time happiness, etc. But they never explain to you why it is bad, right? Even if they said that, oh, because these people need money, because they're marginal, but Marvel has already told you how these people still have a basic rationality to work. All right, they still, because they need to still eat food, they need to provide for their family, they need to work to live. So I don't understand how they're framing that, assuming that these people under our side wouldn't work. Because at the very least, people who are under our side, they're still working enough, but they're happier, right? They're not burnt out of their passion, and they still do things that makes them happy. Unlike on their side of the house, if you're an artist and you work hard like 5 hours, 6 hours a day, purely on art, you're gonna be burnt out faster. You're not gonna enjoy art anymore, and that is why on our side people are happier. And I feel like that's a good enough trade-off for families, right? And even if the people's productivity are reduced, we think that it's okay because what do they deserve after years of being shackled by the capitalism world? It is the way that they would fight against this capitalistic narrative, even if it would cost them. We think that it's okay, right? And also, I think that the people still have an instinct to working for their life, because it is very extreme to say that the marginal people wouldn't work, scroll TikTok all day, right? And it is very extreme. So we think that it's very important to ensure your mental and physical well-being, and to be at a level of where you respect them, you respect yourself, right? So okay. Secondly, on their opposing side, upside is only rich people are able to rest, and our response to this is on their side as well. The rich are only able to rest too. So what's the difference? But on their side, rich people are allowed to rest and travel because marginal people are being shackled by the narrative that you have always to work. At least on our side, we give everybody a chance to travel, rest, and enjoy life. And at least we democratize the chance and opportunity to take a rest and travel because it was being normalized. But on their side, they were what? Yes?
Under your side, vulnerable people feel worse because they are pressured to achieve an aesthetically peaceful lifestyle but they realistically cannot afford that. How would you respond to that?
As I've said before, in my first clarification, people who are trying to rest, it means that they don't need to travel. They can just socialize more. They just need to stop their working, and they have a work-life balance, right? That's what I've said in my first in earlier stages of my speech. But okay, and at least on our side, the people that are prioritizing their health, they make sure not to burn themselves out from their passion. They enjoy what they do, and even if you make less, earn less, you are happier. You can still provide for your family while enjoying what you do. You would burn out less, and you are less stressed, which is better for your families, better emotionally, and your physical well-being too. And they said that our side slow life is accessibility and internationalized. I feel like under our side of the house, accessibility would be widespread because we have told you that the slow life under our side means that people will work as hard as the status quo, and they will work to fulfill their daily needs, but also children would not have the highest grades because again, they won't work as hard as in the status quo. But at least kids and young people in our side would be happier because many young people already feel like they're very tired from the constant pressure to achieve something, meaning that there's a narration that supports them to have a better health, have a better mental, and that would likely it would be more likely for them to pick this kind of mindset because it makes them chiller, happier in life. Without the glorification of this lifestyle, students who become adults wouldn't have as much self-respect. And we know that this, as my second speaker has said, that this self-respect is very important. But okay, Moving on to clashes, right? Under two metrics, which is the urgency and happiness. Firstly, the happiness of people. Government says that if you gain money, you gain what job you wanted, you're happy. But panels, note that this is not the case. I believe our side has showed you that there's an urgency on how if you're burnt out, your passion is dead because of repetitiveness for too long. You no longer enjoy what you're doing, and it ruins your happiness. And this, the happiness on our side is simply better. Why? Because you still have the passion for something, even if you're doing it in a long time, right? That means that you're still happier, and this is better for your families. It is better for your it is better for maybe in when you've achieved adulthood, you have a family, you have kids. That means you're happier and you're there for the family, right? Unlike their side, where you gain a lot of money, but you're never there for your kids. What would happen then? People, your kids wouldn't be as happy, and yourself wouldn't be as happy. And secondly, is accessibility. Government believes that this is a soft life, is inaccessibility, and is inaccessible for people. Only rich can do it. But panels, I feel like I clarified it before. It's the same thing on their side. But our side is better because at the end of the day, our side makes an effort to prioritize mental and physical health. It means our side is inherently healthier, and they are more capable in terms of mental and physical well-being. Proud to oppose. Thank you.
We thank the opposition for their speech. Next, we call upon the opposition reply. Here.
That's I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. We think that without this glorification of these lifestyles, students who become adults wouldn't have as much as self-respect, for example. And we know that self-respect is important. Imagine these panels. Students work hard, sacrifice time, health for grades, get accepted in jobs, work hard in jobs. Their boss tells them to work overtime for a small percentage of a bonus money. They would do it because from the very start, from their youth, they never value their time, they never value their health or themselves. They only chase the productivity. This will translate to chasing higher wages when after they graduate. In days of the house, they chase productivity, maximum time spent on something leads to burnout, but they still force themselves to do it, etc. We think that we have to fix this, right? Proposition forget how capitalism is already bad in both sides of the house. Look how working hard till you physically can no more is already the norm. This slow life help to combat the negative of this of this capitalistic world, right? Two classes here. First classes, which narrative is true. We think that on the government side, unfortunately, their first speaker of the government never explained what the counterfactual, what is the counter narrative that will be happen on their side of the house. When their second speaker come and said that, our counter narrative is wouldn't be that capitalistic, etc. We think that they also never explain. So if the counterfactual in their side of the house is not capitalistic, it's also not soft life. So what is the counter narrative under their side of the house? But comparatively, we already tells you that the counter narrative that are most likely to occur under the side of the house is the capitalistic narrative. So how to weigh this? So how to weigh this? Firstly, we give it a better likelihood why it is why capitalistic narrative is the most possible one, because Marvel already explained how school system and the work system always push this narrative naturally when there's a reward for those who work hard, for example, and also there's a punishment for those who are not work hard, for example. So it will be naturally pushed by the inherent system itself, by the company and by the company and by the school system itself. But comparative under this of the house, they never explain what's the likelihood that also if there's no capitalistic narrative, so what is the narrative will be pushed then? I think it's unclear for me, right? But second class is then. The second class is about the protection to the margin actor. Government said that they want to protect those margin actors who need work to survive, etc. But opposition side want to protect those people who are being demonized if they want to rest on the government side. For example, also the sandwich generation and also the young people are being forced to work hard, for example, to sacrifice their life, to sacrifice their family at time and effort, for example, to sacrifice their own happiness in order to if this glorified slow life narrative doesn't exist under outside the house. So how to weigh then? Firstly, we think that we protect more actor here, but secondly, we think that we also able to protect the actor that government wants to protect. When we explain that, firstly, I think that yeah, as Reski already told you, how in this of the house working hard is not enough for this marginal actor, because in this capitalistic world it is very hard for these marginal actors to, for example, to climb up this office ladder, for example, also, or to climb this economic ladder. I think that the work hard that are being the work hard they undergo in their side of the house wouldn't make them be rich, for example, etc. But secondly, so I think so. I question why these people don't deserve to rest from the get go. But secondly, we think that if the main concern is about the productivity, we think that the productivity is falling under outside the house, because we already told you that mental and physical well-being is the prerogative of their productivity. If these marginal people are being sick under their outside the house, we think that these marginal people couldn't afford to buy a food, for example, because they can't work for 2 days, for example, because of the sick, for example. So we think that it also, I think that under outside the house, these marginal people still could are having incentive to work, because they still need food. They still need food to survive, for example. But the work under outside the house will be secukupnya, for example, or for example, yeah. But I think that comparatively they never explain why this sandwich generation and these young people will be protected under the outside the house. We protect more actor. So propose. Oppose.
We thank the opposition reply. Next, I call upon the government reply. Hear, hear.
Hi, just checking. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you, Kak. Starting my reply speech. Wait. Starting my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. Under their world, soft life becomes performative lifestyle pressure instead of genuine peace. In real life, it looks like young people feeling pressured to afford Pilates classes, yoga memberships, wellness cafe, solo healing trips, and etc. just to feel like they're living correctly. Social media constantly romanticizes this calm, balanced, aesthetically peaceful lifestyle. Eventually, people who can't afford that lifestyle feel insecure, left behind, or like they're failing self-care too. Their side doesn't remove pressure, it simply replaces hustle pressure with wellness pressure. Big mistakes needed to be pointed out here. A. Their case is based on their own case, demonizing our counterfactual. Ivanka already explained to you from the beginning our counterfactual from the very start, and there has been no engagement at all. Op needs to have to trade off if they want to outweigh our case, from which our speakers have been extremely charitable from the start. B, we tell you from the very start that soft life is a slippery slope into a lazy lifestyle that is incompatible with this capitalistic world. Meanwhile, they keep trying to tell you that this won't happen without any explanation until now. Weak case. And C, late case and clashes coming from their third speaker has only given a little bit of engagement there, but still never really answer outside. Stagnant case from the start. Reasons why we should win. Under the first clash, comfort versus resilience. What government proved to you, Judge? We proved that glorifying soft life changes how young people interpret struggle itself. Instead of seeing hardship as a meaningful and temporary, they begin seeing discomfort as something inherently unhealthy that should always be avoided. Over time, this weakens resilience, coping ability, and long-term emotional stability. What did we get in respondent? Op only says hustle culture is toxic and burnout exists, but we already concede extreme overworking is harmful. They never prove why the solution must therefore be glorifying comfort. They also explain how people develop resilience if they constantly avoid pressure. So the wing is quite simple. Our side prepares people for reality. Their side emotionally comforts people while making them less capable of surviving adulthood long term. Temporary stress is comparatively better than permanent fragility. Second question on the issue of accessibility and normalization. What government proved to you? We proved to you that soft life is dangerous precisely because it is extremely accessible and culturally attractive. Unlike ambition, which requires sacrifice, discipline, soft life can immediately be practiced by lowering expectation or like simply disengaging from pressure. Social media, at the end of the day, rapidly normalize this mindset at mass scale. What ops say, accessibility is good because more people can prioritize mental health, but they never answer the consequence of normalizing avoidance itself across society. If everyone is taught discomfort is unhealthy, collective tolerance for responsibility and sacrifice inevitably declines. The way their world may feel emotionally nicer individually, but culturally it produces stagnation because fewer people are willing to sustain difficult commitments. Our world, compared to their world, we still preserve ambition, and also social functionality long term at the end of the day. Third clash then on the issue of vulnerable people. What we prove to you, we prove soft life mainly benefits privileged people who already have financial safety nets. Poorer and middle class youth still live in competitive system where survival requires sacrifice and resilience. Teaching them to avoid pressure only leave them more unprepared for harsh reality. What they respond, upset capitalism already punish people under our side, but this actually prove our analysis right. The real world still rewards discipline and endurance. Their side simply creates emotionally comforting narrative without changing the material reality. The way here is that our side honestly prepare for vulnerable people for how the world functions. Their side of the house, they give vulnerable people unrealistic expectation of comfort while the privileged people remain protected anyway. So under all of those reasons, I'm so proud proposition.
Okay, and that ends the semifinal debate. For all teams, you may return to the main hall and wait for the announcement while me and my panel deliberate. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ka. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, for the panel, Kak Gwen sama Kak Yel, kita bisa pindah ke breakout room yang Delip 2 ya. Thank you.